Hi, welcome to the Lissa Goodman Show. And every week I get the honor of introducing a game changer in the wellness arena. And today I have Shira Myrow. She is a psychotherapist, and what is so special about her is that she really teaches more couples therapy, how to really go deep and sort of get out of the way of your own story and empower you and learn how to really have intimacy and being authentic in the relationship. So it's really amazing how it's not really just about talk therapy, but she gives you tools on how to take them out of the office and go home and really connect with your partner. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Lissa, for having me.
Thank you. I've just been wanting to have you forever.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I absolutely love what you do.
Thank you.
I also didn't mention that you have an incredible app, which we will talk about.
Yes.
Too, that you developed.
Yes, a meditation and mindfulness app.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about, how did you get into psychotherapy and being a therapist as well as dealing with couples? Therapy.
Okay. The long or the short?
Well, how long is the long?
The long is the long. I think I was always interested in what made people tick. I was a musician actually for many, many years before I went to graduate school and decided to become a psychotherapist.
Which instrument did you play?
Piano. I sang, I wrote songs, and I sequenced music for a long time. But those first years, I think when I first had my first child, were very, very difficult for me, and I became interested in attachment theory, and because things were going so wrong that first year, I began to get more and more curious about what was going on developmentally with my son, and that led me to graduate school, and eventually, it's kind of interesting. You get pulled towards something very specific.
There's no coincidences, right?
I actually don't think so.
You were meant to go this direction.
Yeah, initially I resisted couples, but it just sort of kept coming, and then finally I realized, okay, there's really something here for me to understand.
Yeah.
And I think what's so fascinating is that, the interrelational dynamics, there's what's happening for you internally, and then there's what happens outside in the relationship.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we bring the deepest wounds into our relationships, not only with our partners, but sometimes with our children as well.
Right.
And so a conflict, a crisis, some real sore point becomes that doorway into deepening and understanding what's going on, and the world is in there.
Right. Absolutely. And a lot of the world, a lot of things, because you carry everything that you experience throughout your whole life with you.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's so, because I'm always fascinated. I'm always telling people, and saying we've got to let go of some of this.
Yes.
Some of these sore points, I guess, that you're saying.
Yes.
Right. And so how do you get people to get to that place?
Well, I found that meditation and mindfulness are tremendous tools.
Right.
It's not a panacea for everything.
No.
I think nowadays you can
You're
use
hearing that.
Yes, we hear it all over the place. But it's a very, very powerful tool for not only self-regulating all the intensity, the emotional intensity that comes up, but it's also a way to get quiet and just to simply observe what's happening. The thoughts, the feelings, the sensations in the body. A lot of the pain that we carry is actually living in the body, the trauma living in the body.
And we can actually feel that?
Sometimes you can. Sometimes
and we
you can.
just push it aside a lot of times.
Shove it down, and then, as you know very well, it manifests in all kinds of different ways, not just in terms of emotional reactivity, but you can get real health problems. The stress can be unbelievably damaging over time, especially for women in dysfunctional relationships.
Right. So you teach them, the people that come in to see you, teach them about mindfulness and meditation.
Yes.
And then how do you get them to really, I'm always curious, how to open up about their traumas and those sore points, as you call them. Does that take a while to get people to go there? Sometimes
it does. I mean, there's other techniques involved, and sometimes someone's a lot more forthcoming about what they perceive to be
ready.
Or maybe they've had a lot of therapy, and then maybe their other partner has to catch up, and you can really only go as fast as the partner who's a little less perhaps self-aware.
Right.
So, but what happens is, and I'm fascinated by this, right? They'll be coming in, and it could be a big conflict. It could, it could be an infidelity. It could be someone just drained the joint checking account.
Right. That's a big
surprise.
Yeah.
But really, when you start to deconstruct what's happening emotionally, people stay above the conflict and in the emotional reactivity and they stay stuck in this negative cycle, and they're never able to drop down to the core wounds or the core unmet attachment needs, or even the primary emotion that they're struggling with. And so you're kind of doomed to repeat this negative cycle until you A, understand the pattern, and B, learn how to relanguage what it is that you're asking for.
Interesting.
Right?
So how do you relanguage?
So, well, great question, right? Instead of attacking or criticizing, if you have that internal regulation piece, sort of knowing what's really upsetting you. For instance, learning how to work with anger.
Right.
Because sometimes anger can feel so monolithic, but when you get quiet and you're just observing your anger, it may be something that needs to be done, some action that needs to be taken.
Okay.
Or maybe you hit some kind of boundary that needs to be set. Or maybe,
for yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Or maybe there's something that you've lacked clarity around that you haven't figured out how to verbalize in a way that's going to get that need met. And so it comes out as anger and reactivity, but if you could say in a softer way, that would mean so much to me if you could make dinner when I'm working late, as opposed to some other unsolicitous way of saying that.
Dinner?
Right.
Why is there dinner on the table when I come home?
Exactly. I worked so hard. And it is a kind of relanguaging. It's a reprogramming in a way.
Yeah.
Because otherwise your solicitations for connection can often go south so quickly.
Right.
And you end up back in that conflict again. Yeah.
So we were talking a little earlier about intimacy. That comes up a lot lately with a lot of my clients, just lack of intimacy.
Yes.
And I know it has to do with some of the trauma and what we're stuffing down and not being able to have the language to get what we need or to ask for what we need in terms of intimacy.
Yeah.
So are you seeing that a lot with clients,
all the time?
That's lacking.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about toxic masculinity in the culture.
Talk a little bit about that.
Or even not so toxic masculinity. Maybe
but still being masculine.
Yeah, and as a mother of boys, I have 2 sons.
Yeah.
I'm constantly trying to think, okay, when is that point where they begin to shut down? I think it's in early adolescence where they really shut down their feelings, where it's, even as a mother, you're encouraging them to talk about their emotional life. I do strongly believe that boys have just as complex emotional lives as girls, but they get the messaging very early on. It's not okay to be vulnerable.
Right.
It's not
more so than us.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. It's not okay to have any of those soft feelings.
Yeah.
It's not okay to present
Cry.
as weak. Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so what happens is, over time, Alyssa, there's a huge deficit in the skillfulness that I think a lot of women kind of take for granted, that they know how to articulate what they're feeling.
Right.
And then that shows up in relationships where, not all the time, but sometimes, the male partner or the partner who has more of a deficit really doesn't know how to connect with the other person.
Right.
And so that creates a gulf of intimacy, or the capacity for intimacy.
Right, right. And if there isn't that intimacy there, or being authentic with your partner, or being really honest, you really don't have the true essence of
You start to lose it.
Yeah, like love
Right?
and just, I mean, you love each other, but it isn't really fulfilling.
Right, you can't kind of reconnect to
Yeah.
that the core attachment. You lose that muscle. And so in a sense, back to the mindfulness piece, you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You have to be intentional about the times that because it isn't going to feel organic. Maybe in the beginning, you don't have to
It's
work.
gonna feel awkward.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like when you're in that first flush of the limerence of a new relationship, you don't have to work hard.
No.
And couples are always coming in saying, we just want to get back to the way it was in the beginning. And then I say, well, it's going to work.
Yeah, it's gonna take some work. Yeah, I was just talking about that last night with my fiance. I'm like, what's that? There's so much going on in our life. We're going different directions, or we're sort of that phrase, two ships passing in the night.
Yes.
And it's not okay. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel.
Well, over time.
Yeah.
We lose that connectivity.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the good part is you can find it again if you really want to work on it.
Right.
But it does require work. And I mean, this as a wellness practitioner, all of these things, the body, nutrition, exercise, requires attention and intention.
Yeah. So what would you say is the first step? So would you teach them when they come to you about, how to go to that place, or how to learn how to communicate with each other?
Well, I'd first really try to understand, what the presenting issues are.
Right.
And so sometimes there's a lot of trauma, or there's some kind of attachment wound that makes it very, very difficult. So usually there's the sort of presenting issues, or Bob's always working late and he's always on his phone and he never has time for me.
Right.
Those kinds of things. And then it's really a slow process of building trust with them. So, and oftentimes couples come in and they, we want solutions, and we read about emotion-focused therapy, and we want to get this out of the way.
Right.
And so, which I understand, but I think one of the big problems with sort of prescriptive relationship advice, and there's a ton of it, and there's
was my question.
a lot of great relationship advice everywhere.
Yes.
So you think, well, why doesn't it work?
Yeah.
Right? I tried to do that, and we tried to do a date night, and
exactly.
I tried
right there.
Exactly. And I think part of the problem is it's really at the surface. It's behavioral.
Okay.
Right? They're prescriptive, and really at the root of the problem is being able to work with the emotional conflict that comes up. And back to the meditation and mindfulness piece, a lot of us don't realize that we're emotionally reactive very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And what we want to move towards is a kind of emotional responsivity, that pause between a trigger and emotion, and then what action we're going to take with that emotion.
Right.
And so if you can create some space in your own thought and say, okay, what's coming up for me? And that awareness that I have a choice, just like eating mindfully, I have a choice.
Yeah.
I have a choice here. That's really going to start shifting things in terms of the external patterns of behavior, because you can stop yourself.
Right.
Right? Or you can say, oh my gosh, we're doing that same thing, or I'm about to lose it with my kids or lose it with my partner. You know what, I'm gonna take a walk around the block so I can calm down and meet you in a place where then we can problem solve.
Right.
But when you're heated and you flipped your lid, there's no problem solving.
Right. There is not. You're
it's not gonna happen.
In the muck.
Yes.
Yeah. I know. So all of this, so, mindfulness and meditation, like you were saying, I know is the savior for so many people these days. I mean, thank God that it is a very growing market of talking about it and leading into your app.
Yes,
What's different from Even Flow is the name of your app.
Yes.
Compared to all the other mindfulness meditation
and
apps
there's a lot of them. Yeah.
They're becoming a lot of them.
So it's really designed for the beginner, or perhaps somebody who's at an intermediate level who wants to integrate some psychological insights. So
Okay.
our team of teachers, they're all psychotherapists and experienced meditation teachers and
Yeah.
educational psychologists. So these are folks in the field who are really using it in their practice.
Okay.
In their
That's
clinical
pretty cool.
practice. Yeah, it really is. And the concept behind it was, okay, so what if you learn those first basic tools to meditate, which is wonderful.
Yes.
You know, to take a breath, to learn how to be present,
Right.
to, you know, perhaps set an intention for the day. But how could you use maybe some psychological insight to deal with stress or to deal with mindful eating?
Okay.
Something that you could think about during the day.
Yeah.
So when that trigger
Yeah.
comes up, you think, oh yeah, I thought about that. Maybe, you know, or maybe I think about my anxiety a little bit differently. I don't have to be so reactive. So it's really kind of pulling in the two.
Okay.
And there's a lot of movement in the field, especially in the psychology world. There's a tremendous amount of interest right now in meditation and mindfulness and how to use that, because it's hard, right? Talk therapy can only get you so far.
Absolutely.
As you know this.
Yes.
It's only one slice of the pie.
Yes, yeah, I did it
Yes.
for years, and it was awesome. But then, you know, you just sort of repeat your story, and yes, it was helpful, and it did release a lot of patterns, but it didn't go deep. It didn't go.
It didn't go deep for you.
No,
Okay.
no.
So that's interesting. So you weren't able to.
it did. I wasn't
integrate?
able to release, and I got to the core of the trauma, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
I didn't release the trauma.
Oh, that's
energetically.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and on an ongoing basis.
That's fascinating.
So,
yeah.
That's what I am fascinated with these days, with talk therapy versus, you know, something that is
There's
a
more
little
of a
bit deeper. Yep.
mind-body connection, and I think we're seeing that everywhere. Right, this sort of integrative approach
Yeah.
to wellness,
Right.
And it really is a mind-body connection, because trauma lives in the body, but so does emotion.
Yeah.
Right, emotion. There's always a physiological response when you have an emotion. We tend to think of emotions up here, but
Right.
not
But they're
necessarily.
not down here.
Yeah, and
not everywhere in the body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing, and that's important information.
Yeah.
You know, which
So
is
it's
that.
like integrative. So you call it. You just said it. It was really interesting. Integrative, like, you know, therapy, right? More
Yes.
integrate, sort of like
Yeah.
integrative medicine. It's integrative therapy.
Right,
in some ways.
psychotherapy, where it's, you know, and that narrative, it's kind of interesting, you know, the narratives that we have about our traumas or our past relationships or dysfunctional families, and then
Right.
how those play themselves out in our adult lives.
Right.
Is really fascinating. So sometimes, I mean, I strongly believe this. I mean, it's probably why
Yeah.
I'm here. Is
Yeah.
that oftentimes you need multiple modalities,
Yeah.
right?
You absolutely do.
And whatever your anxiety or neurosis or whatever it's presenting as,
Yeah.
it's actually going to present in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different arenas of life.
So what would you say are the multiple modalities that you would recommend?
Well, let me think hard about that one. I mean, obviously, the body, and nutrition, you know, meditation and mindfulness.
Right. Coming to see you.
And you.
The app.
Yes, that the app can be useful, right? There's all these different. We have to carve out space for that,
Yeah.
and it's very hard, right? We all live very busy lives, and so sometimes people think of this idea of self-care. You know, when you say it, you see the eye roll, like, oh God, here they go with the self-care lecture again.
Right.
But it's so important, and so what happens is people wait. They wait till there's a problem. They wait till,
They get sick.
yes, they wait till the relationship is in fumes,
No.
right?
Yeah.
Where they're on the verge of divorce, or they, you know, wait, maybe they've been suffering from a breakup, or maybe they haven't been in a relationship for years.
Right.
And they've been dating and just getting more frustrated and more bitter.
Yeah.
And then they show up. And what's hard about that, right, is there's a lot of pent-up emotion and so much pain,
Yeah.
and the narrative that goes along with it, right? I'm unlovable, or this isn't working, or
I'm never going to get married.
I'm
I'm
at
never
my
gonna
wit's
find
end.
someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know,
Never going to be healthy. Just
what do you see when they come in?
yeah, that's it. Yeah, never. I'm not ever going to be healthy. I'm always going to have these issues, and I do see some of the stuff you see too. Like they talk to me about, just being unhappy in the marriage or the work, or not really taking the steps to change it.
Yeah.
Too, they're afraid, or they're just so used to being in this box and and telling themselves the same narrative, right?
Yeah, and it really becomes habitual.
Yeah.
It becomes habitual.
You got to
And
break the habit.
yes, you have to break the habit, right? There's a narrative, but there's sort of a habitual, and it's not just the narrative, but there's an emotional pattern that goes with it.
Yeah.
So it's deep. There's
It's narrative and emotional. So,
yes, there's all these layers, right? And then it may come out as maybe emotional overeating or eating the wrong kinds of foods to self-soothe.
Yep.
They can't regulate.
Yeah, exactly.
So
wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of deconstructing to do.
Yeah.
But hopefully, the pain is what compels them to want to change and to want to think about it differently. And especially when there's children involved.
Yeah, especially,
they're passing down.
Some of those traits that they are,
right, or maladaptive coping skills, they're passing that down to the kids, either that or creating a whole set of new problems for the kids.
Right.
And so I kind of think of it as systemic, right? You think of your work as systemic, right? The whole body, the whole system, even the whole family.
Right, exactly.
And when I certainly work with couples and even individuals, I think about it in the whole system. But it's hard because there's a lot of resistance to change.
I know.
Anytime you try to poke the homeostasis, even if it's not working, you're going to meet pushback. Right. And that's what I warn couples coming in. I say, okay, you know what? You're gonna feel so excited. You've got insight. You know what the problem is. And then they'll be like, oh my God, we just got back in the same fight. What happened?
Yeah, exactly.
What happened?
Whoa. Well, I could talk to you all day, of
Me
course,
too.
because you're just so amazing and lovely and so insightful.
Oh, thank you. Ditto.
But I ask all my guests if they had to sum up their mission in one word, what would yours be?
That's a beautiful question. If I sum up the mission, reconnection.
I love it.
Yeah, reconnection.
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.